September 19th, 1944. German town of Münsterbusch. Lafayette Pool's gloved hands felt cold on the metal hatch as he stood naked in the commander's room. As dawn broke, they stood still and looked ahead at the tree line. His orders that morning were clear, almost like a shield. Do not spearhead today, P. You and your crew are going home for a war bonds tour. Keep to the side. Keep yourself safe. But P knew one while he was in that turret 6 miles from Archon, and the Siegfried Line's concrete teeth were behind them. Truth that had been burned into his mind by almost 3 months of combat. During war, the idea of safety was a lie. What was written on the Sherman tank below him in white block letters showed the mood. It was the 3rd time those words had been on American steel under his. Tell them. The first 2 tanks with that name were destroyed. This one will join them in less than an hour for a moment that will end the worst tank-killing spree in history of the American military. The smell of diesel exhaust and burned gunpowder from the night before was still in the air in the morning. A day of fighting. Poole heard the rumble of other Shermans moving into place and the sound of treads on. The sound of tank commanders checking their positions over the radio in low voices and the uneven ground. German defenders with 88mm guns were hiding somewhere ahead in the buildings and rubble of Münsterbusch. And rockets for tanks. P had seen these weapons a lot of times before. Months. He knew how to respect and fear them, but never let that fear get the best of him. Hold him down. His whole view on tank battles was based on one idea. Start by striking. Hit hard. Shut the enemy off before they could bring their better weapons to bear. That anger had kept him alive for 21 years. Major attacks, by destroying 2 tanks, and by many close calls where German shells missed by inches or bounced off armor without going through it. But this morning, when I got home and, with safety coming up soon, Poole's luck was about to run out. On June 14th, 1941, Fort Sam is in Houston, Texas. The papers for joining the Army had the signature of a farm boy from Odem, Texas. He dropped out of Texas College of Arts and Industries to serve his country. Lean and 6 feet 2 inches tall, Lafayette Green Pool had worked hard for years as a. He stood on dry, black South Texas soil, his hands rough from pulling ropes and plows before they would learn how to drive a 33-ton Sherman tank. He was born 5 minutes after John Thomas, his twin brother, on July 23, 1919, in the small farming community of Odem, but he grew up on a farm close to Sinton, a town next door. Both. The towns were in the coastal plains of South Texas, which got over 100 degrees in the summer. And it didn't rain much. In the 1920s, living on a farm in Texas meant hard physical work from dawn until dusk, like working cattle and fixing fences. Fixing things with whatever materials were available or that could be made do. Electricity was still something that not many rural families could afford. There was running water from hand-pumped wells. Radio shows were the only way to have fun when batteries could be afforded, and Sunday church gatherings for the community. P and his brother John Thomas were. Despite having different personalities, they are close. In the end, John Thomas joined the Navy and served on ships in the Pacific during the war. Their sister Tinny May made the P family whole. Their dad, John McKinley Poole, and his mother, Marion Lee Ruth Poole, taught their children the value of service, discipline, and hard work. Lafayette, young, who went by bearing the name Leaf among family and friends, exhibited exceptional athletic and academic prowess. From a very young age, he went to Taft High School and graduated in 1937. Was a great football player who stood out on the pitch because of his speed and drive to win. But P's, their skills went beyond sports. He had a sharp mind and was fiercely determined to do well in school. P went to Corpus Christi after graduating from Taft High School in 1937. College Academy is a Catholic preparatory school for boys that is known for having high academic standards. P did well. He studied with the same intensity he used for football and farm work in this tough environment. In 1938, he graduated as class valedictorian, which opened many doors for him to pay for his future schooling. P then went to Texas College of Arts and Industries in Kingsville, which is now called. Go to Texas A&M University Kingsville and major in engineering. He was good at for maths and mechanical systems, pointed to a good job opportunity in engineering, but P's education would be interruptions by events in the world that he couldn't control. When he was in school, he also tried boxing and competed in the 165-pound weight class. He was good at boxing, temperament just right. Aggression and quick reflexes were needed for the sport. Strategic thinking and the mental toughness to keep fighting even after getting hurt. Proved. He is very good in the ring and has an impressive amateur record of 41 wins and no losses. The sectional Golden Gloves Championship in New Orleans, Louisiana, was his. His aggressive style and strong punches won it. The National Golden Gloves organization asked him to compete in the national finals, which could have been started a career as a professional boxer. He said no. He had other ideas. The risky life of a professional fighter wasn't as interesting to him as studying engineering. However, the discipline, anger, and competitive spirit he learned in boxing would help him in a very different setting. Fight. The world was at war by 1941. Germany had taken over most of Europe. Britain was the only country that stood up to the Nazi war machine. Japan was growing all over Asia. The U.S. officially stayed out of the conflict. But everyone knew that when the U.S. joined the fight was bound to happen at some point. All over America, young men had a choice. They could wait to be drafted or enlist and choose which branch of the military they would join. He chose what to do. In June, November 14, 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor would force America into World War II. During the war, Lafayette went to the Fort Sam Houston recruitment office in San Antonio and joined the Army of the United States. He was 21 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed about 175 pounds, and had the mental discipline of a scholar and the physical skill of an athlete. The Army would change him into something completely different. A tank commander who would become the most dangerous person in American history. History of war. The 3rd Armored Division that is just being formed at Camp Beauregard, Louisiana, was Poole's first experience with fighting with machines. What the division had been put into action on April 15, 1941, just 2 months before P joined the Army as of the United States' huge military buildup in case of war. It would pay for the 3rd Armored Division too. The name Spearhead because it helped break through German defenses in France and into Germany. Always being in charge of the advance and always going deeper into enemy territory than any other unit. P was given to the company. He would be in the 3rd Platoon of the 32nd Armored Battalion and be in charge of tanks. What an assignment. Would make his life clear. The 3rd Armored Division showed that the United States was committed to mechanized battlefield warfare, a fairly new idea that worked horribly well for the Germans when they took over France and Poland. The structure of the division was based on what the Americans had learnt from watching the German panzers fight. It mixed tank battalions with armored infantry, artillery, engineers, and support units that were all trained to work together as a single fighting group. The division's main offensive power came from its tank battalions, which were first given the M3 Lee medium tank. There is a 75mm gun in the hull sponson and a 37mm gun in the bow tower. Before it was used, the M3 Lee was out of date, but American tanks. In 1941, production could not yet make enough of the better designs that were being planned. The M4 Sherman was about to come out. It would be the standard American medium tank for the rest of the war, making things when P joined the Army. It was hard to train at Camp Beauregard, and hard to get. P and the other tankers he was with learned how to run, fix, and fight from armored vehicles in every possible situation. They practiced shooting until they could figure out who targets and quickly engage them. They learned how to use radios to talk to other tanks, infantry, and weapons. They looked at German tactics and gear to learn what the Germans could and couldn't do. Panzers they would have to fight in the end. They practiced in the field for hours on end, simulating attacks, defenses, and operations of pursuit. The country in Louisiana became their school. There were forests and swamps that made the land look like the battlefields in Europe, where they would eventually fight. Poole was immediately recognized as unique because of his natural anger, tactical instincts, and fierce desire to win. During training exercises, officers noticed how hard he worked and how he wouldn't settle for second place in anything. P's tank always got one of the best scores in the battalion during gunnery practice. During exercises, P showed an innate knowledge of the terrain and enemy positions that went beyond what could be taught in schools. He learned everything there was to know about tanks, like how they moved, fought, and where there were weaknesses. He learned to read the land like a book, figuring out what positions that gave them advantages in terms of fire fields, hiding places, and ways to move forward or backward. Most importantly, P showed leadership. The men he commanded looked up to him. He had my trust, and I would follow him anywhere. People would have to earn and keep that trust. Dozens of times in battle, P expected the best from himself and his men, demanding that they go through endless drills with guns, driving, and tactical moves. And he wasn't mean or unreasonable in what he asked. He just knew that in battle, the difference between a crew that was well-trained and one that wasn't was life and death. You could fire first every second you saved by getting the target faster. Each shot that came in, that meant the enemy had one less tank to shoot back. Every good radio call was better. Help and coordination. Poole taught his crew these lessons over and over again until things became second nature. It was simple to load, aim, fire, and reload. Like breathing, it became second nature to find the target, judge the distance, and change the fire. When they finally went into battle, the crew would need all of that training. When P was given the chance to become an officer, he turned it down. Rank-and-file officers led from the battalion or company level, coordinating many tanks and other units from places of command. P wished to fight in a tank and be in charge from the front, where he could see the enemy and split-second decisions about strategy. He would rather stay with his crew and close to the battle. That choice would show that defining. In battle, staff sergeants usually didn't lead platoons, but P's exceptional. Because of his skills and aggressive leadership, he was trusted by his superiors to lead many tanks in attack after attack. That tasks that would normally be the job of lieutenants or captains are done. Training went on through 1942 and into 1943. 1943, going beyond Camp Bogard to other places. The Desert Training Center is in the Mojave Desert in California and Arizona. This is where the 3rd Armored Division was sent. The wide open spaces and harsh conditions were great practice for possible battles in North Africa. Desert maneuvers put both people and machines to the test in very hot, suffocating conditions. Dust and land that didn't offer any cover. Tank commanders learned how to find their way by dead reckoning through empty wastes. Crews learned how to take care of their vehicles in situations that metal to get bigger, seals to break, and systems to get too hot. What was learned? It would be helpful to fight in the desert, but the 3rd Armored Division would fight in Europe instead of Africa. After training in the desert, the division moved to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, to finish getting ready for deployment. Over there, the forests and rolling hills of Pennsylvania were more like European land than either the swamps of Louisiana or the deserts of California. This is where the combined arms tactics that would be so important in France and Germany were practiced by the division. Tanks got better with infantry support is provided by artillery fire, and engineers are ready to break through obstacles and clear minefields. Radio discipline got better. The steps for maintenance were made better. Weak spots in the organization and tactics were found and fixed. It was late 1943 when the 3rd Armored Division was ready for battle as much as training could make it. During these years of training, P went through some big events in his personal life. In December 1942, he married Evelyn Wright while he was on vacation. A short time of peace and happiness before he left for the war that would shape his generation. Evelyn and I would wait for him during the war and write letters that kept P going during the worst parts of battle, raising a. The family would have 8 children in the end, 4 boys and 4 girls. The couple would be married until P's death almost 50 years later, which shows how strong the bond they made in those few moments was. They were together before P left for England. P and the 32nd. The armored regiment got on troop ships in New York Harbor and crossed the Atlantic to set up camp in England. It took to cross about 2 weeks, with thousands of soldiers sleeping in ships that had been turned into passenger liners and cargo ships. Having to live in small spaces, ride rough seas, and always being afraid of German hubris. The convoy went in a zigzag pattern across the Atlantic to stay safe from submarine wolf packs. by destroyer squadrons that patrolled the edges and dropped depth charges whenever sonar signals indicated it was necessary. Submarines are possible. It was safe for P and the other tankers to get to Liverpool at the end of September 1943. It would be 9 months in England for the 3rd Armored Division, from September 1943 to April 1944. June 1944, they kept training and got ready for the invasion across the English Channel that everyone knew was coming. Knew was going to happen. The division was set up near Bristol and Somerset and Liverpool, doing drills in the English countryside, learning how to work with British units, and getting the final things that would make the division stronger, like new equipment and parts. Waiting turned out to be hard. Everyone knew that an invasion and battle were coming soon, but no one knew when or where it would happen. There were always rumors going around. It was very safe. The training kept going. During P lost for the first and only time in combat sports this time. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, a heavyweight boxing champion, went on a tour of England in July 1944 and fought in exhibitions for the troops. Louis was one of the best heavyweights of all time. He became a cultural icon, and his fight wins became symbols of American strength and determination. His second win, fight in 1938 between German boxer Max Schmeling and the U.S., meaning as a rejection of Nazi ideas about race. Louis now used his fame in friendly exhibition fights with servicemen to boost morale among the troops. Not many soldiers were eager to fight the world heavyweight champion, but P, who was always sure of himself. He volunteered for an exhibition match because he is always competitive. The fight was set to happen for July 4th, 1944, which was Flag Day in Liverpool. It was meant to be a friendly exhibition and light sparring to keep the troops entertained. P had a different plan. His instincts as a boxer and competitive person took over. He went after Louis aggressively, landing a number of hard blows that caught the champion off guard. Because of this, Louis put his "White man, I'm going to teach you a big lesson," he said quietly as he put his arm around Poole. Lesson. The lesson came quickly and completely. Louis then hit P with a punch. He taught the young sergeant a lesson by using his speed, strength, and technique to beat him up without hurting him. Louis could have knocked P out at any time, but he chose to show how different professional boxing is from amateur boxing. Boxing for money. After the fact, P would say that Joe Louis threw him around during that exhibition. But P got something more valuable than a win. He learned that even overwhelming strength and if you use the right strategies at the right time, you can beat someone with physical gifts. He learned that anger is bad. It wasn't enough just by itself. It mattered to have skill, good timing, and tactical intelligence. The lessons he learned would help him in the fights to come. On June 23, 1944, the port, English town of Weymouth, along with the 3rd Armored Division, ships for the going over to Normandy. It had been 18 days since the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. Before, the beachhead was held by the Allies, who were now pushing inland against strong enemy resistance. Germans fought back. Now units that were sent to help, like the 3rd Armored Division, would cross the channel to join the fight. Tanks and other vehicles in the division had been carefully waterproofed for the landing by water. Every hole is covered and sealed so that seawater doesn't get into the engines and compartments during the wait. Boats that land on land. The men were well prepared, but they were still nervous. Everyone knew stories about how crazy D-Day was, how many people died on Omaha Beach, and how desperate the fighting was in the hedge. It was their turn now. The 24th of June, 1944. France's Omaha Beach is in Normandy. It rained steadily as the 3rd Armored Division landed 18 days after D-Day. That made the beach a muddy mess with people, cars, and tools being processed through crowded areas for assembly. The beach still had marks from when they came in. Landing craft that broke down lay part of the way under the water. German defenses that had been destroyed were all over the cliffs. Everywhere there were huge stores of food, fuel, ammunition, and other supplies. Space that is open. Military police directed traffic and tried to keep order as thousands of vehicles moved inland to meet up with their owners. The smell. Salt water mixed with diesel exhaust, wet ground, and the smell of explosives that doesn't go away. Poole's first Sherman, an M4A1 with a 75mm main gun, didn't make it to shore. An event. The ceiling worked, The engine turned over, and the tank went up the beach on its own. Over the next few days, the division got together in certain places, waterproofing, firing test rounds, doing maintenance, and getting ready for combat. Pool's crew had been working out together for months, getting better at in-sync precision that made the difference between life and death in battle. Now they would find out if that training was enough to prepare them for battle. Personally picked each a member of his crew, picking men whose skills and personalities went well with his own and were not too aggressive. Method of fighting. Officer Wilbert Richards, who was called Baby because of his driver, who had a baby face even though he was 24 years old. Richards, even though he was short, 5 feet 4 inches, stocky, and wiry, he was very skilled at moving the Sherman around. Pool was proud that Baby could park the 33-ton Sherman next to each other in downtown New York. Rush hour traffic, a lie that held some important truths. Richards, they could get the big tank through narrow village streets, turn around quickly while under fire, and set up the Sherman for the best firing angles with more accuracy than most drivers. Richards, he drove with his hatch open as much as possible because he had been stuck inside a tank once when the hatch got stuck. Training. He has always been afraid of being trapped inside a tank that is on fire because of what happened to him. Every tanker shares this fear. Talked about it, but Richards felt it more deeply. The open hatch let him see better and gave him a faster way to get out if the tank was hit, but that made him more open to rounds from other guns and shells. Separate first class. Bertrand Close, who was only 17 years old and was called a schoolboy because of his youth and wire-rimmed glasses, was using the .30 caliber Browning M1919 as an assistant driver and bow gunner. There is a machine gun in the front hull. Close was born in Portland, Oregon, and he had smooth features and a small build that made him look younger than his years. But looks were deceiving. Close was mean with that bow machine gun, killing enemy soldiers with accurate fire. What he did from the front of the tank, he had a good view of what was coming from the enemy to the right and forward. They would use to get close enough to the tank to use Panzer Fasts or magnetic mines to attack it. During intense battle, Close was also in charge of helping to load ammunition by passing rounds from storage racks to the loader when speed was very important. Officer Willis O.L., 29 years old and was known as Groundhog, was in charge of the main gun. O.L. was older and from Illinois. He was calmer and more methodical than the rest of the crew, which was different from Pool's intense personality. He was able to see all of France through his gun sights, but his face would always have the mark of his tanker on it. Glasses. He always had his eye on the sight, ready to shoot at any sign. Moment. It's possible that the gunner's job was the hardest in the tank. The gunner had to pick out targets, quickly figure out the range, pick the right kind of ammunition, and aim precisely as the tank moved, and fire at the exact moment in question. Those, in a matter of seconds, and often while under enemy fire. This had to be done while explosions shook the tank and smoke blocked the view. Seeing. Ola did a great job at this hard job. His well-placed shots would destroy. Over the next few months, P would destroy German tank after German tank, which made him even more confident in his skills. Tech for 5th grade Delbert Boggs, who is 22 years old and from Lancaster, Ohio, and loader for a ship called Jailbird. The nickname came from where he came from. Crew law says that Boggs was arrested on manslaughter charges and was given a choice between jail or prison. The armed forces. Boggs joined the army, which gave him toughness and street smarts that helped him in battle. No matter how much of the story was true or made up, it showed something important about Boggs' life. Virtues. He was tough, strong, and always dependable when things went wrong. The job of a loader was hard on the body. A 75mm round weighed about 25 pounds. The 76mm rounds they used later were even heavier. During tough times, in battle, the loader could handle dozens of rounds, choosing the right type of ammunition based on Pool's orders. Even though there wasn't much room and the tank was moving quickly, the loading went smoothly. Then, right away, afterwards. Even though Boggs was skinny, he was strong and tough. It was possible for P to load his tank faster and more reliably than most other Shermans. These four, the men led by P, called themselves the Pups, and their leader was called Wardaddy, which was a nickname that stuck with both of them. Love and respect for the man who kept leading them to hell. The name Wardaddy came about during training, Poole's intense focus on getting ready for battle and his parental concern for the well-being of his crew created a. He was both their leader and their protector at the same time. Ola was older than P, but not by much. Even though he was older than the others, his strong personality and ability to lead made him the natural leader of the group. I completely trusted him. Over the next few months, that trust would be put to the test many times. The crew had often. During training, they did better than other division crews at using guns efficiently. Each man worked well with the others. He trusted his brothers and knew what his job was. When P gave the order to fire, the crew responded with the accuracy of a machine. Driver, stop. Gunner, Sabo's tank in front of it on the way. Boom. If the crew is well trained, it might take less than 5 seconds to go from seeing a target to firing. Pools. The crew could finish it in 3. That speed would save their lives over and over again. Poole's strategy was simple and harsh, and it came from years of training and studying German armored tricks. Always move forward and never back down. Shoot first and kill. He believed in getting close to the enemy and getting to ranges where the Sherman's advantages in mobility, speed, and fire and crew training could make up for the Germans' better armor and firepower. German tanks like the Panther and Tiger had better guns and thicker armor that could destroy a Sherman at gun ranges where the Sherman couldn't get through their frontal armor. The answer was to never fight for too long. Range. P pushed closer and moved to get shots from the flanks where even a Panther's armor couldn't protect it. Be penetrated, and German crews will be hit hard with accurate fire quickly before they had better weapons. They could use them effectively. Poole felt crowded and would rather, instead of being tucked away inside, ride open in the turret or on top of the tank. This was a strength and a weakness. It was easy to see the weakness shown in the tower. Poole could be hit by small arms fire, fragments of shells, and the shock waves from nearby explosions. Fire that wouldn't have been able to get through the tank's armor would have killed or hurt many tank commanders. Stayed closed on the inside, but the strength was big. Getting out of the open hatch or sitting on. He could see a lot more from the top of the turret than commanders who fought from behind and looked through periscopes and eye holes. He could see threats earlier and find targets more quickly. Stay more aware of what's going on around you. He saw the battlefield in 3 dimensions instead of the periscopes gave people tunnels of vision. That edge in knowing what was going on often meant whether you want to shoot first or be shot first. When tanks fight, usually shooting first meant staying alive. Lieutenant and Poole's battalion commander, Colonel Walter Richardson, was also from Texas, and the 2 men became close through mutual respect. We were both angry. Richardson saw P's great skills and gave him more responsibilities, even though he was only a staff sergeant. Richardson told W that P rode. His tank was always open, like a bucking bronco. He was always vulnerable, taking the lead from the front. That tough way of leading motivated Poole's crew and made him the obvious choice to lead attacks with spears. Richardson would tell P over and over to take the most, to lead attacks into the strongest defenses, which is a very dangerous job. Poole never said no or hesitated. He just got in his tank and led the way forward. Before Sherman by Poole, before it went into battle, it needed a name. Tank crews often painted their names on their vehicles, making the steel machines they lived in and relied on for survival their own. Poole picked In the Mood, taken from Glenn Miller's famous swing song, which was a huge hit in 1940 and is still a fan favorite in Theos. Servicemen. The upbeat beat and catchy energy of the song summed up something. In regards to Poole's fighting style, angry, sure of themselves, and unstoppable, the name would become well known. The 29th of June, 1944. The Fossard de Villa in France. The combat command of the 3rd Armored Division, were told to cut down a German salient northeast of St. Lo, which was a defensive position held by the 353rd Infantry Division has a Fusilier battalion. For the division, this would be its. It was Poole's first time in battle and the first combat operation. The job was to attack a salient that was 3,000 yards deep. The town of Villa, which is east of the Via River and north of St. Lo, had its facade protected. The Germans had. They set up strong defenses and made the most of the Normandy hedger, which turned every field into a natural defense. One of the most important things was the hedge of Normandy. The terrain in France was hard for American troops. Built up over many years, the fence was made up of thick, 3 to 4 foot tall earth walls that were topped with a lot of bushes and small trees make up the vegetation. They were in every field and on every road, making a maze of natural defenses that slowed down movement and made it easy to hide for. Positions for defense. German soldiers and anti-tank guns could hide behind a hedge and not be seen until attackers were right there, within shooting range. There were tanks trying to get over hedgerows. They let enemy fire hit their weak belly armor. The first attacks by the U.S. units learnt these lessons the hard way in Normandy, where disasters cost a lot of lives. American engineers came up with a way to fix it. They cut away big steel beams from the German walls that had been there. They welded these beams onto the fronts of Sherman tanks to make battering rams to stop the D-Day invasion. We call them Rhino tanks. These Shermans that had been changed could smash through hedge rows at high speed without having to climb over them. This lets tanks keep their armor while breaking through into nearby fields. The new idea changed the situation in battle, allowing American armor to move around easily so it can work well in hedge country. At 9 a.m. on June 29th, Combat Command A attacked with Task Forces X and Y, moving abreast towards the front of Villiers' house. Squadron Pool moved with Task Force Y on the right side. Before the advance, American guns hit German positions with artillery to get ready. 3 hours before the tanks moved forward, the shelling filled the air with the shrill sound of shells, the sound of explosions. Then they were told to move forward. Sherman from Pool moved. Along with other tanks from Task Force Y, they moved forward and smashed through the countryside of Normandy to get to the German positions. You could only see the next row of hedges, which was sometimes only 50 yards away. Radio. Pool's headset was full of chatter as other tank commanders reported contacts and asked for help from artillery. They planned their movements. The crack that makes German 75mm guns stand out. The sound of anti-tank guns could be heard all over the battlefield, and then the sound of American tank guns got louder. Smoke and black from vehicles that were on fire moved across the fields. Through gaps in the bushes, Pool saw German cars coming up behind them. Half-track at 10 a.m., 300 yards. He told OL to fire, and he sent a 75mm high, blasting a round downrange. The round hit the German car straight on, and it blew up in flames. Pool's crew killed 3 Germans on that first day of battle and killed more than 70 enemy soldiers. The chaos and violence of it turned out that P had trained for exactly this kind of combat. However, training could never fully get someone ready for what would happen. The noise was too much. There was real fear. The adrenaline sped up time. Speed up and slowed down at the same time. It was Pool's training that took over. He moved aggressively, pushing forward and not giving up. What his crew said in return: discipline and accuracy, with each man doing his job exactly as he had been taught in countless training sessions. Then the moment that every tank crew dreaded came. In the mood came into the village of La Forge, which is part of the Villiers-Faycar battle area, moving down a narrow path. Street between buildings made of stone. The village was thought to be safe from enemy forces, but information wasn't complete, and things changed quickly during battle. A German soldier in a Panzer pulled up next to the Sherman as it went down the street. The anti-tank weapon that Faust fired from his shoulder was aimed and fired from less than 50 yards away. The Panzerfaust was a simple weapon that did its job well. A one-time use launcher with a shaped charge warhead on the end. Thoughts. Through more than 200 millimeters of armor. Not even close to being enough to hurt a Sherman. The rocket motor went off with a whoosh, and the warhead flew across the short distance and hit the mood side. Armor with a metallic crash that rang through the crew compartment. The charged shape went off against the armor, making a jet of very hot metal that went through the wall and into the crew area. It shook the tank violently. The inside was filled with smoke. There were alarms. Pool told to right away. Order, get out of there. All 5 crew members scrambled from the disabled tank, moving with the practiced speed that training had instilled. P was first out through the commander's hatch, followed by Ola. Richards and Close exited through the driver end. Assistant driver hatches in the front hull. Boggs squeezed through the loader's hatch. They all escaped before ammunition could cook off or fire spread through the vehicle. The crew had survived their first tank loss with no Casualties, though the experience left them shaken. In the mood, the first Sherman to bear. That name was destroyed. The crew had lasted exactly 5 days in combat. P and his crew rejoined Task Force Y on foot, hitching rides on other tanks, until they could be assigned a replacement vehicle. The battle for Villiers-Fossard continued through June 30th. Combat Command. A lost 31 tanks and 12 other vehicles during the 2-day battle. A stark introduction to the reality of armored combat in Normandy. The defensive fire from Germany was accurate and deadly. The terrain always helped the defenders, but the attack went through anyway. It worked. The Americans took Villiers-Fossard and held it until parts of the 29th came to their aid. Division of Infantry. It was good news that the 3rd Armored Division passed its first test. It learned useful things about hydro fighting that would help it in the coming weeks. July 1st, 1944. In a Normandy village, P and his crew got their new tank, an M4A1 with a new 76mm main gun, which was called an M4A176W. Poole got this better version of the tank before anyone else in his regiment. A sign of his fame. Performance during the battle against Villers-Fossard. The new tank had a lot more firepower than the old one. The W stood for wet stowage, which is an important safety feature where gun racks are concerned. Around them were containers full of a mix of water, ethylene glycol, and a chemical called. This wet storage made the risk of a terrible fire much lower. When the tank was broken through, early Shermans were known for catching fire when they were hit, which earned them the tankers in Germany called them Ronson, after a cigarette lighter that was advertised as working the first time, every time. The wet stowage system made it much easier for crew members to stay alive. The 76mm gun. Compared to the 75mm, it was a huge improvement in how well it could penetrate armor. But the 75mm M3 gun could only. The 76mm M1 gun could, in ideal conditions, go through a Panther's frontal armor at less than 100 yards. It can go through Panther's side armor from 2,000 yards away and its front armor from up to 500 yards away. When using bullets that can go through armor, the most powerful against German Mark V tanks. The 76mm was a common German medium tank gun that worked at even farther ranges. On the other hand, the 76mm fired a less powerful high-explosive round than the 75mm, which makes it a little less useful against infantry and soft targets. Aims 4. Because Poole hunts tanks at close range in a hostile way, the better ability to fight armor was very helpful. Poole had right away in the. Following the tradition, mood was painted on the new hull. The crew got on their brand new vehicle, learning how to use the slightly different controls and layout. The 76mm gun was extra long and heavy than the 75mm, which slightly changes the tank's balance. The inside of the way that ammunition was stored was different. The crew had to learn these differences in order to make the new tank their own. This is what P and his team would ride over the next 6 weeks. This vehicle is part of an important chapter in American tank warfare history. The Hedgerow fight of Normandy put every tanker's nerve and skill to the test. It was very easy to follow the battle rhythm. Move up to a hedge. Fire at the next hedger. Ask for help from the artillery. Assault through the hedge while being shot at from behind. Clean up the enemy infantry on the field. Moved on to the next hedgerow. Do this over and over again every day. Every day, yards were used to measure visibility. Surges came from everywhere. Direction. Behind every rock, German 75mm and 88mm anti-tank guns were hiding. Wall and a row of hedges. Their long barrels were carefully hidden until American tanks got close enough to kill them. English. It was night, and infantry with panzers sneaked up on American positions, waiting for the chance to fire. Shaped charge warheads into the sides or back of the tank. The number of deaths for the tank crews was crazy, but Poole's tactical sense was truly amazing. He developed a sixth sense for reading the land and figuring out where the enemy was likely to be before they showed themselves. By themselves, he looked at how shadows fell, how plants grew, and from different places, you can see sight lines. He learned how to spot the sign. Small changes in the plants that could hide a gun position are signs that someone is getting ready to defend themselves. The best places to fire that a skilled enemy would naturally choose. Being able to think like the enemy, to guess what they would do, gave P a huge advantage. Seeing threats, before they found him, he attacked first and usually killed the enemy places before they could fire back effectively. One time, moving forward at dusk in the town of Lamsnell, Herman P. was about to tell his driver to stop for the night when he saw a shape in the 50 feet ahead. There is darkness. When a German 40mm anti-aircraft gun is put in place, crew didn't know the Sherman was there. The Germans were moving around their position as they got ready for bed. Without the discipline that comes with men expecting to talk right away, P was aware of. He knew right away that he only had a few seconds to act before the German crew saw his tank. Without telling him or giving away his position with orders over the radio that could be heard, P just yelled. The order, "Gunner, fire," came from instinct. Being mean, as I was already fixed on the sight, as it always was. His hands went right to the gun right away. In charge, the 76mm gun roared and fired a round that could go through armor straight at the German point of view. The short distance was covered by the projectile in a split second, and it hit the 40mm gun straight on. The impact broke the gun and killed or hurt the crew right away. The whole thing, from pool spotting to. It took about 3 seconds for the round to hit the target. At that moment, the crew's reaction, which came from hundreds of hours of training and more combat experience, was typical. Efficiency. They were in the best possible state for combat soldiers, where training turns into instinct and choices are made without thinking. Happened faster than you can think about them. Another event at night near Colombia, France, almost ended in disaster, but instead showed how smart P was as a commander and how great his crew was. Skill. Pool's platoon was moving forward slowly through the dark, drought country, where it was hard to see more than a few yards. Operations at night were very dangerous for tanks. It was hard to see, even with the tank's basic infrared gear. Enemy. When it was dark, infantry could get very close. When units lost, friendly fire happened a lot. They knew where each other was, but they had to move at night because of the situation, and P led his platoon forward. All of a sudden, the mood almost hit a German Panther tank, and the two. When two cars came around adjacent corners of a hedgerow, they were facing each other from about 30 yards away. When it came to armored vehicles, the Panther was one of the most feared. It had a 75mm KWK-42 gun on it that could go through the front armor of a Sherman from more than 2,000 yards away. How the Panthers? The Sherman's 76mm gun could hardly get through the frontal armor, except at very, very close. On paper, the Panther was better than the Sherman in every way that could be measured, except maybe speed. Dependability in mechanics. German tankers said they could beat the Sherman with a Zippo lighter, destroy Shermans easily, while American bullets hit Panther armor and didn't do any damage. But fights don't happen on paper. The Germans had better technology, but Pool's aggressive tactics and better crew training made up for it. The two commanders spotted each other at the same time. Both told the fire to start. The Panthers' crew fired 2 shots quickly after each other, but both missed because of the darkness, surprise, and shaky aim. Miss. One went over the Mood's turret with a crack of air being pushed out of the way, and the other just missed hitting the ground. Hit the front of the Sherman and bounced up, just missing the belly armor by an inch. Ola's answer was right. 1. The Panther's armor was broken by a 76mm round fired from point-blank range. Turret ring to protect the weak spot where the turret joined the hull. The round went off inside the turret, setting off the ammunition and killing the crew right away. The German tank erupted in flames, illuminating the area with orange light that destroyed what remained of Pool's night vision, but also silhouetted other German vehicles in the area. P immediately called for his platoon to engage additional targets while backing away from the burning Panther before its ammunition exploded. Catastrophically, the engagement lasted perhaps 10 seconds from initial contact to the Panther burning. P had won a duel with a technically superior tank through superior crew work, better training, faster reactions, and more accurate shooting. News of Pool's kill spread through the battalion and then the division. American tankers feared the Panther and Tiger. Stories circulated about German super tanks that could destroy Shermans at ranges where American guns were ineffective. Crew morale suffered when facing these monsters. But P had proven that German tanks could be killed. Aggressive tactics, good crew drill, and accurate shooting could overcome technical inferiority. P's example inspired other tank commanders to fight more aggressively to close the range where American advantages in maneuverability and rate of fire could compensate for weaker guns and thinner armor. July 26, 1944. Operation Cobra began with one of the most concentrated bombing campaigns in military history. Over 1,500 American heavy bombers and 380 medium bombers dropped nearly 4,000 tons of bombs on German positions south of St. Lo in just a few hours. The bombardment was intended to pulverize German defenses, creating a gap through which American armor could pour into open country. Beyond the hedge, the plan worked brilliantly despite tragic friendly fire. Incidents that killed over 100 American soldiers, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. The German lines shattered under the bombardment. Their defensive positions ceased to exist as coherent fortifications. Surviving defenders were dazed, disorganized, and unable to mount effective resistance. The 3rd Armored Division led the exploitation, punching through the shattered German lines on July 29th and racing south into open country. After weeks of grinding hedge fighting, where progress was measured in hundreds of yards per day, the division suddenly found itself in a war of movement. Tanks raced down roads at 20 and 30 miles per hour, covering more ground in hours than they had in weeks of previous fighting. German units bypassed and isolated by the rapid American advance attempted to retreat but found their escape routes cut. Thousands of Germans surrendered. Those who attempted to fight found themselves overwhelmed by American firepower and mobility. Pool's tanks spearheaded attack after attack during the breakout, always in the lead, always pushing forward. The role of Spearhead tank was simultaneously an honor and a death sentence. The Spearhead tank was first to encounter enemy resistance, first to be engaged by anti-tank guns and panzerasts, first to hit mines or run into prepared ambushes. Casualty rates for Spearhead tanks were astronomical. But P volunteered for the role again and again. His crew never questioned his decisions. They trusted Wardaddy to get them through, and somehow, despite the odds and the mood, kept rolling forward, kept destroying enemy vehicles, kept surviving when other tanks were hit and burned. At Dyson, Belgium near Leg, P distinguished himself while acting as platoon leader during the pursuit across France into Belgium. The 3rd Armored Division had advanced so rapidly that P, a staff sergeant, was leading a platoon of 5 tanks because no officers were available. His column was advancing down a road when they took fire from the left flank. German Halfracks and armored cars attempting to escape the encirclement had stumbled into the American column. P ordered his column to continue its advance while he turned in the mood to deal with the threat. The crew located the German unit, perhaps a dozen vehicles attempting to move cross-country through fields and woods. Pool closed to effective range and opened fire, destroying 6 enemy vehicles in rapid succession. The German column scattered, some vehicles attempting to escape, others returning fire ineffectively. While P was engaged with this threat, word came over the radio that a German Panther had appeared ahead and was engaging the American column. P had to choose: continue mopping up the vehicles he had already engaged or race back to deal with the more serious threat of the Panther. He chose the latter. P ordered Richards to get back to the column at maximum speed. The Sherman raced down the road at 25 miles per hour, faster than was safe, given the terrain and visibility, but P knew that every second counted. His column needed support immediately. As they approached the reported Panther position, P scanned for the German tank while Boggs loaded armor-piercing rounds, and Ola prepared to engage. P spotted the Panther engaging American Shermans from a hull-down position behind a slight rise. The German tank had the advantage of a prepared firing position and was methodically engaging the American column. 2 Shermans were already burning. P could see crew members from one tank bailing out through flames and smoke. The Panther's attention was focused forward on the American column it was engaging. The German commander had not yet spotted P's tank approaching from the flank. P immediately recognized the opportunity. Never interrupt an enemy when he is making a mistake, Napoleon had advised. The Panther commander was fixated on his targets to the front, presenting his side armor to Pool's approach. P gave the fire command. Gunner Sabo Panther left flank. Ola traversed the turret smoothly, putting the crosshairs of his sight on the Panther's side armor just below the turret ring. On the way, the 76mm gun fired, the round covering the distance in less than a second. The armor-piercing projectile struck the Panther's side armor and penetrated cleanly, detonating inside the crew compartment. The German tank shuddered. Smoke poured from its hatches, and moments later, flames appeared. The crew attempted to bail out, but the internal explosion had killed or stunned them. Only one German crewman managed to escape before ammunition detonated, catastrophically blowing the turret off the hull. P had destroyed his second Panther, again through superior tactics rather than superior firepower. He had maneuvered to get a flank shot where his 76mm gun was effective, and his crew had executed perfectly. The American column resumed its advance, now with P's tank in the lead, having earned the spearhead position through demonstrated capability rather than assigned duty. August 7, 1944. The Files Gap battle represented one of the most significant engagements of the Normandy campaign. Allied forces were attempting to encircle and destroy the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army, trapping them in a pocket near the town of Falaise. If successful, the encirclement would destroy the primary German forces in Normandy, opening the way for a rapid advance across France to the German border. The operation required American forces advancing north from the south to link up with British and Canadian forces advancing south from the north, closing the gap and trapping the Germans inside. Pool's tank led Task Force Y of combat. Command A during the closing of the pocket with Lieutenant Colonel Richardson monitoring the radio from his command position. The fighting was chaotic and desperate. German units attempted to break out of the encirclement, attacking American positions with everything they had. Other German units already west of the pocket attempted to break through American lines from the outside to create an escape route for their trapped comrades. The result was a massive confused battle, with units from both sides intermixed, fighting, meeting engagements and ambushes in the Norman countryside. As Pool's column advanced, they encountered groups of German soldiers attempting to escape on foot, having abandoned their vehicles and heavy weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson listened on the radio. As P closed with a group of fleeing German troops, Pool's voice came over the radio. "Ain't got the heart to kill them." The humanitarian impulse was real and reflected P's character despite his aggressive reputation. German soldiers attempting to flee on foot represented no immediate threat to Pool's mission, but Richardson knew that P understood the tactical situation. Immediately following came the sound of Close's .30 caliber bow machine gun opening fire. Richardson heard Pool's voice again. "Watch the bastards run. Give it to them close." The humanitarian impulse lasted only a moment before tactical necessity prevailed. German soldiers fleeing in disorder still represented a threat if allowed to escape, regroup, and reorganize. They would be issued new weapons and return to combat. More Americans would die fighting them later if P allowed them to escape now. Pool's job was to destroy the enemy's capacity to resist, and he executed that mission without hesitation, despite his personal feelings. The incident illustrated the moral complexity of combat, where good men must do terrible things in service of necessary missions. From August 29th to 31st, 1944, P commanded the lead tank in an attack that would earn him the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second highest decoration for valor. The citation approved by division headquarters and signed by senior commanders described P's actions in detail. P was advancing alone ahead of his task force, having outdistanced supporting tanks in his aggressive push forward. Enemy contact was expected, but Pool's exact location and the enemy dispositions were unclear in the fluid combat situation. Over the course of 3 days, advancing often alone or with only one or two other tanks, P's crew engaged and destroyed 4 German tanks in separate encounters. The first was a Mark V, destroyed from ambush as it attempted to cross a road. The second was a Sturmgeschütz assault gun destroyed at close range after a brief running fight through a village. The third and fourth were Panthers destroyed in a single Engagement where Pool's tank came under fire from both vehicles simultaneously and destroyed both through superior shooting and crew discipline. In addition to the tanks, Pool's crew destroyed 3 anti-tank guns that had been positioned to ambush American armor, approximately 50 unarmored vehicles, including half-tracks, trucks, and cars, and killed or wounded an overwhelming number of enemy personnel. The citation noted that P's unflinching courage and inspired leadership in the face of devastating hostile fire permitted the rapid advance of his task force with minimum casualties. His extraordinary heroism, personal bravery, and zealous devotion to duty exemplified the highest traditions of the military forces. The award citation understated the danger of what P had accomplished. Advancing alone or with minimal support, P had deliberately placed himself in the most dangerous position to draw enemy fire and identify enemy positions. Every anti-tank gun he destroyed had gotten off at least one shot at his tank before he killed it. Every German tank he engaged was theoretically capable of destroying his Sherman before he could destroy it. P survived through a combination of skill, aggression, crew training, and extraordinary luck. The Distinguished Service Cross recognized his actions, though many who witnessed them believed he deserved the Medal of Honor. Over those 3 days in late August, P demonstrated that aggressive action, superior tactics, and excellent crew work could overcome numerical and technical disadvantages. The Sherman was inferior to German medium and heavy tanks in armor and firepower, but P proved conclusively that the tank with the better crew won the engagement, not the tank with the thicker armor or bigger gun. His example inspired other tank commanders throughout the division to fight more aggressively, to take calculated risks, to close with the enemy rather than engaging from standoff distances where German technical superiority was decisive. August 17, 1944. From France, Combat Command A was clearing remaining German forces from the village during the exploitation across France. The war had become a pursuit, with German forces retreating toward Germany's borders and American armor racing to catch and destroy them before they could establish new defensive lines. P's tank was leading the attack into when disaster struck. From an unexpected direction, American P-38 Lightning fighter bombers appeared, overhead hunting for German armor. The P-38 was a distinctive aircraft with twin engines and a central crew nacelle, easily recognizable and usually a welcome sight for American ground forces. The P-38S provided close air support, attacked German convoys, and helped American units by spotting enemy positions and calling in artillery. But on this day, the P-38 pilots made a fatal mistake. From the air at several thousand feet, all tanks looked similar. The distinctive profiles that allowed ground observers to identify friend from foe were much harder to distinguish from above. The P-38 pilot saw tanks advancing through a French village and assumed they were German. The lead pilot called out the target and began his attack run, followed by his wingmen. The P-38S carried rockets, devastating weapons, effective against armor when fired from diving attacks. P saw the aircraft diving toward his position and immediately recognized the danger. He grabbed the radio handset, calling frantically to identify his unit as friendly American forces, but the P-38S were already committed to their attack. The first aircraft fired a salvo of rockets. The projectiles streaked down toward in the mood trailing smoke. Pool had no time to react, no way to evade. The rockets impacted around and on the Sherman with devastating effect. One rocket struck the turret. Another hit the engine compartment, and explosions erupted across the tank. P gave the immediate order to abandon the vehicle. The crew bailed out with practiced efficiency, scrambling from hatches as fire and smoke engulfed the Sherman. All 5 men escaped, though several suffered minor injuries from the explosions and the desperate exit from the burning tank. They ran clear of the vehicle seconds before ammunition began cooking off, sending flames and secondary explosions shooting skyward. In the mood, the second Sherman to bear that name was destroyed, not by German forces, but by friendly fire from their own air support. The incident devastated P and his crew. They had survived nearly 2 months of intense combat against German forces, had destroyed dozens of enemy vehicles, had fought their way across France, only to lose their tank. 2 American aircraft. The P-38 pilots, upon learning of their mistake, were reportedly distraught. Friendly fire incidents were one of the tragic realities of modern warfare, where fast-moving operations and split-second decisions sometimes led to catastrophic errors. But understanding the cause did nothing to lessen the impact on Pool's crew. For the second time in less than 2 months, P and his crew found themselves without a tank. They had survived 2 complete losses of their vehicle, first to a German Panzerfaust, now to American rockets. The odds of surviving even 1 tank loss were poor. Surviving 2 seemed almost miraculous. But P's luck was not exhausted. Within days, he and his crew received their 3rd Sherman, another M4 A1-176W with the 76mm gun. Once again, P had in the mood painted on the hull. The tradition continued. The name had become synonymous with P's tank, recognized throughout the 3rd Armored Division as belonging to the crew that led every attack that destroyed more enemy vehicles than any other crew that seemed to bear a charmed life despite constant exposure to danger. The 3rd in the mood would carry P and his crew through another month of combat, through the advance to the German border, through the penetration of the Siegfried Line to the final battle that would end P's war. September 1944, the 3rd Armored Division advanced rapidly across France and into Belgium, pursuing German forces that were attempting to retreat to the Siegfried Line, Germany's defensive fortifications along its western border. The Siegfried Line, known to the Germans as the West Wall, consisted of bunkers, tank obstacles, and minefields stretching for hundreds of miles. Built in the 1930s as a defensive line against France, the fortifications had been neglected during Germany's years of offensive victories. Now, with Allied forces approaching German soil, the Wehrmacht was desperately trying to man the Siegfried Line and prepare it to delay the Allied advance. The race to reach the Siegfried Line before German forces could fully occupy and prepare its defenses became a critical objective. If Allied forces could penetrate the line while German defenses were still disorganized, they might be able to push into Germany itself before winter halted operations. But if the Germans successfully manned the Siegfried Line with sufficient forces, the Allies would face months of costly fighting to breach the fortifications. Pool's tank continued to lead attacks during this pursuit phase. His crew's tally of destroyed enemy vehicles climbed steadily. By early September, P had personally accounted for the destruction of over 250 enemy vehicles, including at least 12 confirmed tank kills. The exact number of German soldiers killed by P's crew exceeded 1,000, though the chaos of combat made precise counts impossible. P's crew had also captured approximately 250 German prisoners, often entire units, that surrendered when faced with the aggressive American tank that seemed to appear everywhere at once. P's reputation had grown to legendary status within the 3rd Armored Division. Other tank commanders studied his tactics, trying to understand how he achieved such remarkable success. Infantry units requested Pool's tank for support during difficult attacks, knowing that Wardaddy would lead the way forward, regardless of enemy resistance. Division headquarters recognized Pool's value, both as a combat leader and as an inspiration to other tankers. But they also recognized that Pool's aggressive tactics and constant exposure to danger made his survival increasingly unlikely. The law of averages suggested that even the best tanker's luck would eventually run out. In mid-September, Division headquarters made a decision. P and his crew would be sent home to the United States for a war bonds tour. They had earned the respite. They had survived 3 tank losses, had fought in 21 major attacks, had compiled a combat record unmatched by any other American tank crew. Their story would inspire Americans at home, would help sell war bonds to fund the continued war effort, and would give these exceptional soldiers a well-deserved break from combat. The orders were cut. P and his crew would complete one final mission. Then they would be withdrawn from the front lines and sent to the rear for processing and transport home. September 19, 1944. German town of Münsterbusch. The final mission began in darkness. The 3rd Armored Division's Combat Command A was tasked with advancing toward Cannes, Germany's first major city to face Allied attack. The approach to Archon required clearing the small towns and villages that protected the city's western approaches. Münsterbusch was one such village located approximately 6 miles from Arkham proper, a small collection of buildings and farms that German forces had turned into a defensive strongpoint. Pool's orders for this final day were specific and protective. Do not spearhead. Stay on the flank. The mission was simple. Provide support for other units conducting the main attack, but avoid the most dangerous positions. Division headquarters wanted P and his crew to survive this last mission before being sent home. P understood the orders, but his nature and 3 months of combat experience told him that no position in a tank battle was truly safe. The attack began at first light. American tanks advanced in a coordinated assault with infantry moving alongside to clear buildings and suppress anti-tank weapons. German resistance was immediate and fierce. The approaches to Archon were vital to German defense, and every yard would be contested. Artillery fire crashed down on both sides. Mortar rounds exploded among the advancing American forces. The distinctive crack of German 88mm guns announced the presence of anti-tank weapons, and Shermans began burning. Pool's tank moved forward on the flank as ordered, providing covering fire for the main attack. The crew worked with the efficiency born of 3 months of combat. Ola scanned for targets through his gun sight. Boggs stood ready with ammunition. Richards maneuvered the Sherman to firing positions that P identified. Close watched the flanks. With his bow machine gun, P stood in the commander's position, exposed as always, directing his crew's fire and monitoring the radio for updates on the battle's progress. However, Willis OL was not in the tank on this morning. Ola had been temporarily transferred back to the United States, part of the routine rotation of combat veterans that the Army used to provide experienced soldiers a respite from combat and to use their experience for training purposes. In OL's place, manning the main gun for this final battle was Private First Class Paul Kenneth King, a 20-year-old gunner from Anderson County, Tennessee. King was experienced and capable, but he lacked OL's 3 months of combat experience with Pool's crew. The synchronization that Pool's original crew had developed through dozens of battles was slightly diminished, though. King was doing his best to match the crew's exceptional standards. The attack progressed into Münsterbusch itself. Buildings provided concealment for German defenders. Every window, every doorway, every pile of rubble could hide a panzer team or machine gun nest. The fighting became close range and brutal. Tanks fired high explosive rounds into buildings suspected of harboring enemy forces. Infantry cleared houses room by room. German soldiers fought back desperately, knowing they were defending German soil now, not occupied territory. Pool's tank reached a street intersection in Münsterbusch. The position offered good fields of fire down multiple streets, allowing P to support the main attack while maintaining a relatively protected position. For a brief moment, the situation seemed under control. American forces were advancing. German resistance, while fierce, was being overcome. P might actually survive this final mission and make it home. Then disaster struck with the sudden violence that characterized tank combat. A German Panther tank, concealed in a protected position that offered excellent fields of fire, opened up on the American armor. The Panthers' commander had positioned his tank carefully, waiting for American Shermans to enter his killing zone. He had identified P's tank as a priority target, perhaps recognizing the in-the-mood markings, perhaps simply choosing the nearest American tank, perhaps following the tactical principle of engaging the most dangerous enemy first. The Panther's 75mm KWK 42 gun fired twice in rapid succession. Both rounds were aimed with deadly precision at in the mood. The first armor-piercing round struck the Sherman's turret, penetrating the armor and exploding inside the crew compartment. The second round hit almost simultaneously, striking the hull and causing catastrophic damage to the tank's internal systems. The explosions inside the turret killed Private First Class Paul Kenneth King instantly. The young gunner from Tennessee, filling in for Ola on what was supposed to be a safer mission, died in the flash of superheated metal and explosive force. He never had a chance to react, never knew what hit him. P, standing in the commander's position, was struck by shrapnel and blast effects from the penetrating rounds. Metal fragments tore into his right leg, causing massive trauma. The concussion from the explosions inside the confined turret space stunned him. But some instinct, some survival reflex developed through months of combat, drove him to give the order to bail out. The surviving crew members scrambled from the dying tank. Richards and Close exited through their hull hatches. Richards overcoming his fear of being trapped to escape through the driver's position. Boggs squeezed through the loader's hatch despite injuries from the explosions. P attempted to climb out through the commander's hatch, but his shattered right leg would not support his weight. He struggled, fighting against shock and pain and the knowledge that the tank might explode at any moment. Then the Sherman, already catastrophically damaged, tipped forward into a large shell crater. The forward motion threw P partially out of the turret, but also trapped him against the hatch rim. His crew, already clear of the tank, turned back despite the danger to help their commander. They pulled P free from the hatch and dragged him away from in the mood as ammunition began cooking off inside the hull. They had perhaps seconds to spare. P was conscious, but in shock from his injuries. His right leg was mangled, beyond repair, shattered by shrapnel and blast effects. Blood loss was severe. The crew called for medics while providing what first aid they could with the limited supplies available in combat. Medics arrived within minutes, stabilizing Poole and preparing him for evacuation to the rear. The crew watched as their commander was loaded onto a jeep and driven away toward a field hospital. They had survived 3 tank losses together, had fought through 83 days of continuous combat, had destroyed 258 enemy vehicles, and killed over 1,000 German soldiers. But Paul Kenneth King was dead, and Wardaddy's war was over. P was evacuated through the medical system, moving from a field hospital to a base hospital and eventually to a hospital in the United States. The damage to his right leg was too severe to repair. Surgeons amputated the leg 8 and above the knee, removing the shattered bone and torn tissue in an operation that saved Poole's life, but ended his career as a tank commander. The recovery was long and painful. Poole endured multiple surgeries, fought through infections, learned to walk again with a prosthetic leg, but he was alive. The final statistics of P's combat service were unprecedented in history of the American military. In 83 days of combat from June 29th to September 19th, 1944, P and his crew destroyed 258 enemy armored vehicles, including 12 confirmed tank kills. They killed or wounded over 1,000 German soldiers. They captured approximately 250 prisoners. They led 21 major attacks, always spearheading, always in the most dangerous position. P survived 3 complete losses of his tank, first to a Panzer Faust, then to friendly fire, finally to a German Panther. His crew survived with him through the first 2 losses, but Paul Kenneth King paid the ultimate price in the final battle. P was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions from August 29th to 31st, 1944. He received the Legion of Merit for his exceptional service throughout the campaign. The Silver Star was awarded for specific acts of valor. The Purple Heart recognized his wounds. The Belgian Führer honored his contributions to the liberation of Belgium. Years later, in recognition of his entire military career, France would award P the Legion of Honor with the grade of Chevalier. P was twice nominated for the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. The first nominations paperwork was reportedly lost in the chaotic final months of the war in Europe. The second nomination was reviewed by the Army Recommendation Board, but ultimately rejected. The official rationale stated that tanks were crews served weapons, and therefore individual heroism in tank combat did not merit the Medal of Honor. This reasoning reflected an infantry-centric mentality in the Army's awards system that failed to recognize the reality of armored combat, where the tank commander decisions, leadership, and tactical skill were decisive factors in success or failure. Many who served with P believed the rejection was a grave injustice. Poole's actions repeated over 83 days of combat demonstrated heroism and leadership that exceeded the standards for the Medal of Honor. But the decision stood the statistical comparison of Pool's achievements to the broader context of World War II armored warfare demonstrates just how exceptional his combat record was. The United States produced approximately 49,000 Sherman tanks during World War II, a massive production effort that provided American and Allied forces with numerical superiority over German armor. Germany produced approximately 6,000 Panther tanks and 1,350 Tiger I tanks. On paper, German tanks were superior in armor protection and firepower. The Panther's 75mm gun could destroy a Sherman at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards, while the Sherman's 76mm gun required ranges under 1,000 yards to reliably penetrate Panther frontal armor. The Tiger's 88mm gun was even more formidable, but P proved that superior tactics, crew training, and aggressive leadership could overcome technical disadvantages. His 12 confirmed tank kills included multiple Panthers, the most feared German tank in the American infantry. He destroyed these technically superior vehicles through superior crew work, better positioning, and faster shooting. Pool's example inspired an entire generation of American tankers to fight aggressively to close the range where American advantages in reliability, rate of fire, and crew training could compensate for weaker guns and thinner armor. After recovering from his wounds and learning to walk with a prosthetic leg, P faced a choice about his future. He could accept a medical discharge and return to civilian life in Texas. Many soldiers would have made that choice, having given more than enough in service to their country. But P loved the Army. The military had become his life, his career, his identity. He had risen from a farm boy with no prospects beyond agriculture to become the most successful tank commander in American history. He wanted to continue serving. P reenlisted in July 1948, choosing to remain in the Army despite his disability. The Army recognized his value and his sacrifices, assigning him to positions where his experience and leadership could benefit the next generation of tankers. P served in various training and advisory roles, passing on the lessons he had learned in combat to soldiers who would fight in future conflicts. His expertise in armored tactics, his understanding of tank gunnery and maneuver, and his leadership abilities made him an invaluable instructor. Paul retired from the Army on September 19, 1960, exactly 16 years to the day, after his final battle at Münsterbusch. The coincidence of dates was not planned, but seemed appropriate. He retired with the rank of Chief Warrant Officer Two, a testament to his technical expertise and leadership abilities. His career had spanned 19 years of service from his enlistment in June 1941 to his retirement in September 1960, including 3 months of combat that defined his life and inspired generations of American soldiers. In retirement, P settled in Keene, Texas, near Fort Hood, one of the Army's premier armor training bases. He remained connected to the military community, attending reunions of the 3rd Armored Division, corresponding with veterans he had served with, and occasionally speaking to military audiences about his combat experiences. He was a devoted family man, raising 8 children with his wife, Evelyn, 4 sons, and 4 daughters. The marriage that had begun during a brief leave in December 1942 endured through war wounds and the challenges of military life, lasting until P's death. But tragedy struck P's family in a way that echoed his own combat service. His son, Captain Jerry Lynn Poole, Sr., followed his father into military service and became an Army Special Forces officer. Jerry P. served in Vietnam during the war's most intense period, leading reconnaissance teams deep into enemy territory as part of MACVS, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. Max conducted some of the war's most dangerous missions, inserting small teams into Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam to gather intelligence and conduct direct action operations. On March 24, 1970, Captain Jerry Lynn Poole was serving as team leader for RT Pennsylvania, one of Max's reconnaissance teams. His team was operating in Ratanakiri Province, Cambodia, approximately 14 miles inside Cambodia, conducting reconnaissance of North Vietnamese supply routes. The helicopter carrying P's team came under heavy enemy fire. The aircraft was hit exploded and crashed, killing all 7 soldiers aboard. Captain P was 29 years old. His body remained in Cambodia, listed as missing in action for over 25 years. The search for Captain Pool's remains became part of the broader effort to account for American servicemen missing in Southeast Asia. Joint recovery teams from the United States and Vietnam and Cambodia conducted numerous searches in the crash site area over the decades following the war. On April 12, 1995, a recovery team located remains believed to be from the helicopter crash. The remains were transported to the U.S. Army Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii, where forensic specialists worked to identify them through dental records, DNA analysis, and other methods. On June 20, 2001, more than 31 years after his death, the remains were positively identified as Captain Jerry Lynn Pool, Sr. He was finally coming home. Captain P was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His name inscribed on the courts of the missing at the Honolulu Memorial until his remains were recovered and identified. For Lafayette Pool, the loss of his son to war was devastating. He understood better than most the nature of military service, the risks that soldiers accepted, the possibility of death in combat, but understanding did not lessen the pain of losing a child. Lafayette Green Pool died on May 30, 1991 in Keene, Texas. He was 71 years old, having lived nearly 47 years after his wounding at Münsterbusch. He was buried with military honors, recognized as one of America's greatest tank commanders. His legacy lived on in the soldiers he had trained, the tactics he had proven, and the example he had set for aggressive, effective leadership in armored combat. In 1993, 2 years after P's death, Fort Knox, Kentucky, the home of Army armor training, dedicated the Tank Driver Training Simulator Hall in his honor. The facility was informally known as the SSG Lafayette G Pool Room, ensuring that every tanker trained at Fort Knox would learn the story of Wardaddy and his crew. Lieutenant Colonel Odem M. Brewster, who had served with P in the 3rd Armored Division during World War II, gave the dedication speech. Brewster spoke about P's courage, his tactical brilliance, his devotion to his crew, and his impact on American armored warfare. The dedication ensured that P's story would continue to inspire future generations of American tankers. Pool's story reached an even wider audience in 2014 with the release of the film Fury starring Brad Pitt. The film's main character, a Sherman tank commander named Wardaddy, was explicitly patented after Lafayette Pool. The Texas State Historical Association confirmed that the character was based on Pool's combat experiences and leadership style. The film depicted the brutal reality of tank combat in World War II, the numerical and technical disadvantages American tankers faced against German armor, and the aggressive tactics that men like Pool used to overcome those disadvantages. While the film was a Hollywood production with necessary dramatic license, it introduced Pool's story to millions of people who might never have encountered it otherwise. The film's depiction of a Sherman tank crew fighting against overwhelming odds using superior tactics and crew work to defeat technically superior German tanks captured the essence of Pool's combat philosophy. The character Wardaddy's aggressive leadership, his unwillingness to retreat, his determination to close with the enemy and destroy them before they could bring their superior firepower to bear. These traits came directly from P's documented combat style and the eyewitness accounts of soldiers who served with him in the 3rd Armored Division. P's legacy extends beyond films and memorial halls. His combat record remains unmatched in American military history. No other American tank commander in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or any subsequent conflict has approached P's tally of 258 enemy vehicles destroyed in just 83 days of combat. The statistical improbability of his achievements becomes clear when examined in context. The average Sherman tank in the European theater survived approximately 11 days of combat before being knocked out or destroyed. Pool's crew survived 83 days across 3 different tanks, continuing to fight effectively after each loss. The average American tank crew destroyed between 1 and 3 enemy vehicles during their entire combat service. Pool's crew destroyed 258. The secret to P's success lay not in superior equipment or overwhelming force, but in the fundamental principles of armored warfare that he understood intuitively and applied ruthlessly. Aggressive maneuver to close the range, where German technical advantages in armor and firepower became less decisive. Superior crew training that allowed faster target acquisition, more accurate shooting, and better tactical decisions under pressure. Absolute refusal to yield ground or break contact, forcing German crews to fight at close range where American advantages in rate of fire and crew coordination could be decisive. Willingness to accept risk and lead from the front, inspiring subordinates and forcing enemy forces to deal with an aggressive threat that never gave them time to establish defensive positions or use their superior weapons effectively. These principles, proven in the hedgerows of Normandy and the plains of France, became foundational doctrine for American armored forces. The aggressive close combat tactics that P pioneered influenced tank commander training throughout the Cold War and into the modern era. The emphasis on crew training on developing the kind of synchronized precision that Pool's crew demonstrated became central to American tank warfare doctrine. The understanding that superior tactics and training could overcome technical inferiority in equipment, proven conclusively by Pool's combat record, shaped American military thinking about armored warfare for generations. Pool's impact extended beyond tactical doctrine to the realm of leadership and military culture. His refusal to accept a commission, choosing instead to fight from a tank rather than command from headquarters, demonstrated a commitment to leading from the front. That became an ideal for military leaders at all levels. His devotion to his crew, his paternal concern for their welfare, combined with his demanding standards for their performance, created a model of leadership that balanced care for subordinates with mission accomplishment. His aggressive pursuit of the enemy, tempered by tactical intelligence and careful positioning, showed that boldness need not mean recklessness, that aggression properly applied could be the safest course in combat. The nickname Wardaddy captured something essential about Pool's leadership style. He was simultaneously the protective father figure who ensured his crew received the best training, equipment, and support possible, and the aggressive warrior who led them into the most dangerous positions again and again. His crew trusted him absolutely, because they knew he would never ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, would never send them into danger while he remained safe, would never sacrifice their lives carelessly or for meaningless objectives. That trust, built through months of training and validated in dozens of combat engagements, created a bond between P and his crew that death could not break. The crew members who survived P's 83 days of combat carried his lessons and his memory throughout their lives. Wilbert Richards, the diminutive driver who could maneuver a Sherman through impossible positions, returned to civilian life after the war, but remained in contact with other crew members and attended 3rd Armored Division reunions whenever possible. Bertrand Close, the teenage bow gunner, who had proven so deadly with his machine gun, similarly returned home and built a life shaped by his experiences. In Pool's crew, Delbert Boggs, the loader whose speed and reliability had given Pool's tank its exceptional rate of fire, carried the memory of his time as a pup throughout his post-war life. Willis O.L., who had been transferred back to the United States and thus escaped the final battle that killed Paul Kenneth King and wounded P, lived with the complex emotions of survivor's guilt and relief. He had been Pool's gunner for most of the 83-day combat period, had fired the shots that destroyed dozens of enemy vehicles, had been part of the most successful tank crew in American history. His temporary transfer saved his life, but meant he was not there when his crew needed him most. When his replacement, Paul Kenneth King, died in the turret where Olin normally served. Paul Kenneth King, the young replacement gunner from Anderson County, Tennessee, who served with Pool's crew for only one mission, became in death a symbol of the random nature of combat casualties. King was experienced, capable, had survived previous combat with other crews. He had the misfortune to be filling in for on September 19, 1944, when the German Panther found its target. King's death at age 20 in Pool's tank during what was supposed to be a safe mission before P went home illustrated the truth that P had understood from the beginning. During war, safety is an illusion. The broader impact of P's combat service on the outcome of World War II is difficult to quantify, but significant. The 258 enemy vehicles P's crew destroyed represented equipment that could not be used against other American units, German soldiers who could not continue fighting, and morale effects on both sides that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Every German tank pool destroyed was one less threat to American infantry advancing through French villages. Every German half-track or truck eliminated meant fewer German soldiers could be transported to defensive positions. Every anti-tank gun knocked out saved American lives. But perhaps more importantly, P's example inspired other American tankers to fight more aggressively, to take calculated risks, to close with German armor rather than engaging from standoff distances. The cumulative effect of thousands of American tank commanders applying P's principles, even imperfectly, multiplied his tactical impact across the entire European theater. The transformation in American armored tactics that occurred during the summer and fall of 1944 as units learned to fight more aggressively and effectively against German armor owed something to P's demonstrated success. The 3rd Armored Division's combat record reflected P's influence. The division spearheaded the advance from Normandy to Germany, covering more ground and destroying more enemy equipment than most other American armored divisions. The division's aggressive tactics, its willingness to take risks and push deep into German territory, created a culture of offensive action that P exemplified. While many factors contributed to the division's success, the example set by its most successful tank commander certainly played a role in shaping the division's combat ethos. Pool's story also illustrates the larger narrative of American success in World War II. The United States entered the war with equipment that was in many ways inferior to German weapons. The Sherman tank was outgunned and underarmed compared to German Panthers and Tigers. American soldiers were often less experienced than their German opponents who had been fighting since 1939. German tactical doctrine developed through years of combat experience was in many ways superior to American doctrine at the beginning of the campaign. But America possessed advantages that ultimately proved decisive. Industrial capacity that could produce 49,000 Sherman tanks too. Germany's 6,000 Panthers meant that American forces could replace losses that were catastrophic for German units. Training systems that emphasized crew coordination and combined arms operations meant that American units, while perhaps less individually skilled than elite German formations, fought more effectively as teams. A culture that valued initiative and aggressive action at all levels meant that men like P could rise to prominence, based on demonstrated ability rather than aristocratic background or party connections. P embodied these American advantages. He was a farm boy from Texas with no military heritage or social connections who rose to become the most effective tank commander in American history through skill, aggression, and leadership. His crew, drawn from across America, represented the diversity that Nazi ideology claimed was a weakness, but that proved to be a strength. Together, they demonstrated that superior tactics, training, and determination could overcome technical inferiority and equipment. The contrast between Pool's approach to tank combat and typical German tactics illuminates different military cultures and philosophies. German armored doctrine emphasized the technical superiority of their vehicles, encouraging tank commanders to engage from long range where their superior guns and armor provided decisive advantages. German training focused on individual skill and technical proficiency. German military culture valued following orders and maintaining formation discipline. Pool's approach inverted these principles. He negated German technical advantages by closing to ranges where they became irrelevant. He emphasized crew coordination over individual skill, understanding that 5 men working in perfect synchronization could outfight 5 individually skilled men working independently. He valued initiative and aggressive action over formation discipline, often operating alone or with minimal support, rather than waiting for coordinated attacks with other units. These contrasting approaches reflected broader differences between American and German military culture. The German military, shaped by centuries of Prussian tradition, valued hierarchy, discipline, and technical excellence. The American, the military valued initiative, adaptability, and practicality because it was shaped by frontier tradition and democratic values. Outcomes. P was successful because he took the American way of doing things and used it. Be cruel to an enemy whose values are different from your own. The ultimate proof that P's tactical philosophy is right came in the way the war turned out in general. German tank technology was better. Design did not keep Germany from losing. The Panthers and Tigers, which were better in every way, dominated German armor. Germany's industrial output in 1944 and 1945 was not enough to make up for it. Weakness, strategic overextension, and the accumulated effects of years of combat losses. Shermans from the U.S. Some historians called them inferior death traps. They were very important in defeating Germany by using superior, more people, better training for the crew, and more aggressive tactics. Simplifying P's story is hard to do. Stories about how Americans fought with tanks in World War II. The Sherman has been. Popular culture shows it as a death trap that wasn't thought out well and killed American soldiers through poor design. Armor and weapons for defense. There is some truth in this story. Compared to German medium and heavy tanks, Sherman didn't have as many guns or weapons. The American tank crews did suffer. A lot of people died, and a lot of Sherman tanks were destroyed in battle. But P's file shows that the Sherman was a very good battle tank when it was driven by a well-trained, aggressive crew. While fighting from, Poole destroyed 258 enemy vehicles, 12 of which were tanks. In 83 days, they fought 3 different Shermans. He lived through 3 complete tank losses and continued to fight well after each one. His crew has had a lot of success. Went beyond what crews in technically better German tanks could do. The lesson is clear. In armored warfare, as in most other types of combat, the crew is more important than how the machine works. This lesson applies to more than just World War II. 2 tank fights. In every era of war, military establishments have had to deal with. This is the balance between having high-quality equipment and training staff well. There is always the urge to look for technological answers to tactical issues, to think that equipment can make up for bad training or bad strategy. Poole's score serves as a permanent record of that belief. If someone who isn't trained well has the best tools in the world, a crew that is led timidly will lose to soldiers who use bad equipment aggressively and are well trained. Armies today still look at Poole's battle records to learn lessons that can be used in modern warfare. The basic idea is P. Even though we have computerized fire control systems, composite armor, and guided missiles, the things that were shown are still useful. Striking close to the enemy to fight at a range that takes away their advantages. Better training for the crew that stresses working together and making decisions quickly. Leadership that makes people trust and keeps people's spirits up even when things are tough. These ideas are not limited to certain technologies, and when it comes to tactics, the Fort Knox Tank Driver Training Simulator Hall is named after Poole's. Remembering these lessons will make sure that they reach future generations of American tankers. Every soldier who trains at Fort Knox learns about Lafayette Poole. They study his strategies, how he led others, and how he fought. Record. The SSG Lafayette Gull Room is both a memorial and a classroom. A place where soldiers are taught about Poole's life so that his memory lives on in conflicts that he himself could never fight, have thought of with weapons he never could have thought of. It's also important to remember Poole's story of the terrible things that war does to people and how random it is to survive in combat. Poole lived through 83 days of battle, the loss of 3 tanks, and dozens of close calls. German rounds either missed by a few inches or didn't go through when they should have. He destroyed a huge number of enemy vehicles, and I killed more than 1,000 enemy soldiers. But in the end, German fire killed his leg, and he saw his replacement take over. An officer with a gun died on a mission that was supposed to be safe before going home. The chance of who lives and dies in. Paul's writing is full of battles, and the way that luck is often more important than skill for survival. Story. William Willis O'L's army killed Paul Kenneth King on September 19, 1944. Being Poole's gunner makes this randomness even more clear. King didn't work with P all the time. O'L had been sent back to the United States, so he was filling in. King was skilled and had a lot of experience. He had lived through battles before, but he was in Pool's tank on the day that a German Panther's aim was accurate. If Ola had been there, he might have died instead. Or maybe Ola's more experience with Pool's crew would have made a small change in the battle that could have made a difference in victory. There are no answers to these questions. King, where lived and where died. Both outcomes were caused by choices that were made by Army personnel officers who had no way of knowing the consequences of their routine administrative actions. Pool's own survival through 83 days of combat, followed by his wounding on what was supposed to be his safest day, carries similar ironies. He survived when he was most exposed, standing in the open turret, leading spearhead attacks, closing to point-blank range with German armor. He was wounded when he was supposed to stay on the flank, avoid danger, survive one more day before going home. The lesson, if there is one, is that in combat, there are no safe positions, no ways to guarantee survival except not being there at all. Pool understood this truth from the beginning. Safety is an illusion. The only way to survive is to fight aggressively, to shoot first, to close with the enemy and destroy them before they can destroy you. This philosophy kept P alive for 83 days and made him the most successful American tank commander in history. It also cost him his leg and killed one of his crew members. Whether the price was worth paying depends on perspective. From a purely tactical standpoint, P's combat service was extraordinarily valuable to the American war effort. From a personal standpoint, paid a heavy price for his success and lived with the consequences for nearly 50 years. Both truths coexist without contradiction. Pool's decision to reenlist in 1948 and continue serving in the Army despite his disability suggests he found meaning and purpose in his military service that transcended the physical and emotional costs. He had been transformed by his war experience. From a Texas farm boy into a soldier, from a soldier into a tank commander, from a tank commander into a legend. The Army became his identity, his career, his life's work. Returning to civilian life, to farming or engineering or some other ordinary occupation, must have seemed impossible for a man who had experienced what Pool experienced, accomplished what Pool accomplished, and survived what Pool survived. His 19 years of military service from 1941 to 1960 spanned America's transformation from an isolationist nation with a small peacetime army to a global superpower with worldwide military commitments. Enlisted before Pearl Harbor when the Army was still training with wooden rifles and obsolete equipment. He retired during the Cold War when the Army was equipped with nuclear weapons and deployed across the globe. He witnessed and participated in the most significant expansion and transformation of American military power in history. His death in 1991, just months before the Soviet Union collapsed and the Cold War ended, closed a chapter of American military history that he had helped write. The veterans of World War II, men like P, who had fought to defeat fascism and preserve democracy, were beginning to pass away in large numbers by the early 1990s. Their generation had literally saved the world from Nazi tyranny, had rebuilt Europe and Japan through the Marshall Plan and occupation policies, had established the international order that defined the second half of the 20th century. Pool's generation, tested in the crucible of total war, proved that democracy could fight and win against totalitarianism, that free societies could match the military effectiveness of dictatorships, that American values were worth fighting and dying for. P's legacy, embodied in his combat record, his leadership example, and the soldiers he trained during his post-war service, continues to influence American military culture. The aggressive tactics he pioneered remain central to American armored doctrine. The emphasis on crew training and coordination that he demonstrated continues to define American tank warfare. The model of leadership he provided, combining paternal care for subordinates with demanding standards and personal example, remains an ideal for military leaders at all levels. But perhaps P's most important legacy is simpler and more personal. He proved that an ordinary American, a farm boy from Texas with no special advantages or privileges, could, through courage, skill, and determination, become extraordinary. He demonstrated that leadership emerges from character and action, not birth or rank. He showed that in the ultimate test of combat, what matters is not the weapon you carry, but the courage you possess and the training you have mastered. These lessons transcend military service and speak to broader American values about individual achievement, democratic opportunity, and the potential for ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. Lafayette Green Pool, Wardaddy, the Texas farm boy who became America's deadliest tank commander, earned his place in military history through 83 days of combat that remain unmatched in American armored warfare. His story, preserved in military records, survivor accounts, and now in popular culture through films and memorials, continues to inspire and instruct. The lessons he taught through his example about aggressive action, superior training, and effective leadership remain relevant decades after his death. His legacy lives on in every American tanker who learns his story, studies his tactics, and strives to match his example of courage under fire and devotion to duty. In the end, P's story is about more than tanks and tactics, more than kill counts and combat records. It is about the transformation of a young man from a farm in South Texas into a warrior who would lead from the front, fight with unmatched aggression, and inspire generations of soldiers. It is about the bond between crew members who trusted each other with their lives and fought as one unit through months of unrelenting combat. It is about the cost of war measured in legs lost and lives ended and families forever changed. It is about an America that could take farm boys and college students, factory workers and teachers, and forge them into the military force that defeated fascism and preserved democracy. Lafayette Pool's 258 destroyed enemy vehicles, his 12 confirmed tank kills, his 1,000 enemy soldiers killed, his 250 prisoners captured. These numbers tell part of his story, but the complete story includes his refusal to accept a commission so he could fight from a tank, his devotion to his crew and their absolute trust in his leadership, his survival through 3 tank losses, and his determination to continue fighting after each one. His decision to reenlist, despite his disability, and serve for another 12 years. His influence on generations of American tankers who learned his tactics and studied his example. His loss of his son to war in Vietnam, connecting his World War II service to the next generation's conflict. His death in 1991, having witnessed America's victory in the Cold War that followed the Hot War, where he made his name. The complete story is about a life defined by service, sacrifice, and leadership. It is about a man who found his calling in the chaos of combat, who discovered that he possessed gifts for tactical thinking and aggressive action that made him exceptional. It is about the price of those gifts paid in pain and blood and the deaths of men who fought beside him. It is about a legacy that extends far beyond his own life, influencing military doctrine, inspiring soldiers, and demonstrating the potential of ordinary Americans to become extraordinary when tested by the ultimate challenge of combat. Lafayette Green Pool, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, Chief Warrant Officer Two, retired. Holder of the Distinguished Service Cross, Legion of Merit, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Belgian Fourrure, and French Legion of Honor, destroyer of 258 enemy vehicles in 83 days of combat. America's deadliest tank commander, Wardaddy to his crew and legend to the army he served, died May 30th, 1991 in Ken, Texas. He was 71 years old. He left behind his wife Evelyn, 8 children, and a military legacy that will endure as long as armies study the art of armored warfare. His story from a farm in South Texas to the battlefields of France to the Memorial Hall at Fort Knox represents the best of American military tradition, courage in combat, devotion to duty, leadership by example, sacrifice for country. These values embodied in P's life and service continue to inspire and instruct. Wardaddy's war may have ended on September 19, 1944, but his legacy endures.